Number 5. The Misty Peaks. The Shrine Ruins was far from the first map to try and tackle a Japanese-inspired forest-type locale. Wasn't the best to do it either. Hailing from Monster Hunter Portable 3rd and then continuing on through Tri Ultimate and Generations, we have the absolutely gorgeous Misty Peaks. Though the Ancestral Steppe has the biggest and boldest autumnal colors, the Misty Peak did it first. And Tri's Volcano may have a magnificently crafted sense of progression with its art, but the Misty Peaks goes for full-on beauty. To this day, years and years after its creation, I'd say the Misty Peaks still ranks amongst the prettiest maps in all of Monster Hunter. Top 5, maybe even top 3 on that list. And it's not just the foliage that's beautiful, it's everything. The caves have this glittering golden glow to them. The mountaintops never lose their verdancy completely. The bright blue sky has these waves of clouds moving across it, which allows for the sun's rays to come pouring in at certain locations. The water is a nice crystalline coloration. The rocks use lighter grays to keep the place feeling bright and alive. There's this great mixture of long grasses, bamboo stalks, shrubs, large deciduous trees, and massive other trees with twisted and curved trunks. Some of the backgrounds here are awesome too. I love the huge stones that dot the landscape, some of them having trees and grasses growing on top of them. The wind sweeps through the valleys that these giant stone pillars inhabit and carries the titular mist through the region. This fog wraps around the entire map, giving it an ancient and mystifying personality. I will circle back to the trees though, because I think they do something super cool here. The shading and color blending for the trees in the Misty Peaks, as well as the varied application of those factors, is amazing. The majority of the trees keep their very lush, deep greens. Some of them, however, have leaves that start to turn to those yellow and orange fall colors as they get further from the trunk. What's awesome is they keep those levels of coloration different between individual trees. Some are almost fully dominated by autumn colors. Others have the first little creeping shades of yellow and orange just beginning to manifest. Some map zones have a ton of the yellow and orange. Others have very little. And what this does is turn the Misty Peaks into this kind of snapshot in time, this moment where autumn is just beginning to take hold in this region. Its influence is a bit stronger in certain areas than it is in others, but it hasn't fully set in just yet. And the quality of the blending of all these colors makes it so that all this different stuff going on doesn't feel abrupt or clunky or distracting or messy. An absolute mountain of work and thought clearly went into the art here. And wouldn't you know it, the travel and the combat in these zones is all pretty fantastic too. It's not a particularly massive map, boasting only 9 zones, and you have some excellent traversal hubs, those being 2, 4, 6, 7, and 9. Almost every zone in the Misty Peaks is within 2 loading screens of every other zone on the map. Moving around here and tracking monsters is incredibly easy. Don't really have any complaints about the fighting either. I don't think there's any really bad zones here. If I'm being harsh though, the Misty Peaks doesn't really break any ground in terms of combat. I like battle zones here because they're nice and spacious with some excellent artwork. Area 6 is a gorgeous centerpiece for the entirety of the Misty Peaks. It's a water-filled battleground fed by a nearby waterfall with huge overhanging tree branches filled with those yellow and orange colors, all while some of those leaves are blowing around in the wind. Love fighting there. 7's a solid zone too. It's a kind of marshy wetland area right next to the lake. You have a lot of tall reeds and grasses that can obscure your vision slightly. That's kind of cool. Area 5 is a nice dense woodland zone. I just wish it had some trees for monsters to smash into or something, especially since this zone usually features Duramboros throwing that giant wrecking ball of a tail around. Speaking of monsters, another great roster. It's got a nice grab bag of lower tier monsters like Great Jaggi and Arzuros, a bunch of aquatic monsters like Royal Ladroth and Plesioth, plenty of forest dwelling wyverns like Nargacuga and the Wraths, and some big bruisers like Deviljho and Duramboros. The core roster is pretty similar to the other watery 3rd generation forest maps, the Deserted Island and the Flooded Forest, so it's not the most unique group of monsters for 3rd generation, but there aren't really any complaints to be had here either. Though I will say the flagships made for the Misty Peaks do add some excellent personality and spice that a few other maps lack. The Misty Peaks was created to match the Japanese aesthetic of Monster Hunter Portable 3rd. It's a map built for its game. Zinogre, Portable 3rd's flagship, absolutely fits with the Misty Peaks very well. He is heavily inspired by the mythological Thunderwolf Raiju of Japanese folklore after all. He looks pretty exceptional at night, all lit up with lightning and hunting amongst the misty woods. woods, but the Misty Peaks received its true ruler a few years later. Monster Hunter Generations Mizutsune is the Misty Peaks. It embodies the Japanese aesthetic, the gorgeous colors, the watery nature, the grace, the beauty, and illustriousness of its home perfectly. Few monsters come anywhere close to personifying their homeland as well as Mizutsune does for the Misty Peaks. And the music here is great as well. Fittingly, it is very Japanese in its instrumentation. The star of the show is the flute player. They set the mysterious and ancestral tone beautifully. I think they very cleverly use percussion backed by lower horns for the driving rhythm. They let the prettier sounding flute and strings take the starring roles and make the track sound very pleasant to listen to, whilst then adding a little extra tension, depth, fattiness, and fight pacing that a battle track still needs. I think the composer did a very good job balancing things so that the more aggressive musical elements aren't sacrificed, and yet the piece can still have its more gorgeous elements up in the forefront. This map is amazing, borderline flawless. If it wasn't for the fact that it isn't all that innovative and lacks some of the incredibly well-executed complexities of the 5th, 4th, and a few of the 3rd generation locales, I think we would be seeing the Misty Peaks being a potential top 3 contender. That's the worst I can say about this map, really. It's pretty safe in a few places, given the context of its era. That's kinda it.